Well, welcome back to Open to Truth, a podcast all about exploring big ideas and discovering truth together. My name's Clint.
Hey, I'm Tony. Welcome back.
Glad to be back in the saddle here.
Here we are.
And true to form, right before we started, we had some ideas and we were just getting caught up.
We had a plan.
And you were asking me some questions about what we might call ecclesiology, or the study of the church. What is the church? I think the question that first
Set you back a little bit.
Should pastors get paid? And I've heard that before.
Yeah.
But just, I don't know. I said, to heck with the plan. Let's do this. Because that's what we were wanting to talk about naturally.
Yeah.
And I think that would come across here. And that's what the point of this is.
It's the point of it.
To discover truth together. And, I've thought about these things before. I haven't really put pen to paper or been necessarily public about them. But let's just see where we go.
Well, we're just interested in the different forms that church can take. Like you've got the classic, I don't know what you would call this structure, centralized kind of a church where there's sort of the lead pastor and maybe some deacons, and then there's a staff team, and they've got different roles, like there's admins and who knows what else.
I get that's funny. That's so funny to call it classic in a way, because, is that within the past 50 years?
Yeah, I know.
Wouldn't you say 95% of churches before 1950? I don't know. I'm just kind of pulling numbers out.
Yeah,
where it's a one-room building. Basically.
It's a small little parish.
It's a chapel, and there are pews, and there is one staff member,
a minister.
The staff team is of one.
Well, yeah,
and
well, what's the staff? Most churches are 100 people or less. Small, right?
I think that's true.
Smallish. So most churches might not have need for some big staff team, but at least in the West and in this last century, you've got this emergence of the mega church or the mid-sized to large church, where now there's this large building and that needs maintaining.
And it's growing, I believe. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? The trend is
particularly
growing?
since COVID, smaller churches couldn't hang, and there's more consolidation, let's say.
Yep.
So smaller congregations are coming together and forming a new or taking the name of one of the previous ones.
Yep.
And there's just more and more gravitation toward these gravity wells.
They are.
In a sense,
I've heard about takeovers, when there's a small church that's kind of getting ready to shutter its doors and some larger church just kind of absorbs it. Well, that's our campus now,
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
That happens, yeah.
Like the franchising of churches. Yeah. So you're right. That's a good
almost
point.
like after the Big Bang or something, the formation of the galaxies. There's all these particles, and then slowly it starts to cluster around these gravity centers, and it feels a little bit like that's happening with church world.
Yeah. I'm wondering how much of this is denomination specific as well. Like, take a Catholic parish somewhere. What do you have on? That doesn't strike me as large staff. Like the Catholic churches I've been to, you've got the priest. I assume he's getting paid by was it diocese? Is that what they?
I'll allow it. Yep.
You'll allow it. You've probably got an admin or a secretary, someone to answer phones, respond to emails, and that sort of thing. I don't know typically that you have many more staff than that.
Janitorial staff, perhaps.
Custodian. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you're right.
But then it's volunteer driven. The altar boys,
maybe a couple of priests.
They're volunteers. The musicians presumably are maybe the organist gets a stipend or something, but it's not a salary, probably. So maybe I'm
not totally sure though.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but I called it classic. You're right, but maybe it's the church world I've grown up in.
I think it's relatively new, these bigger churches. But maybe to kick us off, just your question, because I think it invites a lot of further questions, is should a pastor be paid? And what kind of I got myself interested by my response to that I kind of want to test that response.
Yeah, that's good.
My instinct was to say, yes, because they are. Now, I don't normally say that about ethics, that things ought to be because
they are.
It kind of violates the ought is.
Yeah, you're going to have to unpack that a little bit.
When I think of I want to say literally all, but I'll just say almost all professions or jobs, they are. Let's ask why are those people paid to do what they do?
Yep. Yep.
They're paid because in our particular system of free market economy, the general market at large has determined that this kind of effort, this work, this labor is worth a certain amount. If you're producing widgets or it's some kind of service you're providing, we view it as this valuable.
It's valuable.
Now,
yeah.
it's not, I don't know if this is, we should think of it as objectively valuable, as some of our, I won't go there. Never mind. Sorry.
You want to talk about Keynesian versus Austrian?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't actually.
Okay.
In the sense that, like, I would not say that what LeBron James is doing on the basketball court is that much more, however much he makes a year, 40 million, objectively better than like a high school teacher.
Yep. Sure.
But we could quibble about that. It's like the inherent value of what he's doing with the basketball versus educating young minds, to the point where he's maybe making like 1,000 or 10,000 times
A lot
more
yeah.
than what a school teacher would make.
Yep.
But why people get paid is the market says this is providing this amount of value.
And the way that is communicated by the market is with dollars.
Yes.
Right. That's how we communicate what's valuable to us is I will give you dollars in exchange for the thing that I find valuable.
So my answer to that question, should pastors be paid? Well, like we can kind of answer it by saying yes, that because they are paid. Some portion of the market of just the people with the collection of people with disposable income to give toward these things have said yes, that they're voluntarily doing it to we enjoy the service, the goods, the labor that you bring to this environment. Or in the case of an organization like that, of a nonprofit, you're giving it to the organization, and with this mindset that you implicitly trust how it's being used.
Yeah,
it'd be strange to be giving funds to something you didn't trust.
Right.
So by the act of giving it, you're usually saying I trust, and then that organization has certain rules by which these people are paid certain amounts.
Yes. Well, that's what I was going to say is I don't know how transparent it is to the average person in a congregation who gives that a portion of what they're giving is going to a staff person's salary. How conscious are people of that versus I'm giving and it feels like it's all going to be donated to charity or something.
Definitely as a child and even a young adult, I wasn't thinking through that.
Oh, same. Well, exactly, man. Because I
thought purely of, I was just thinking cause. Like what is this? Clean water. Cool.
Yeah.
My dollar will provide liquid to the child.
Yeah.
And it will, but only a certain percentage of it.
That's right.
Because the thing needs to run and it needs work to get the water to them and all this stuff. So
no, I felt the same way. That's why I had never planned on working at a church. I mean, it didn't occur to me even when I was growing up in church that the people who were running it were paid to run it. I mean, in hindsight, I probably should have realized that, like at the amount of time they spent on it.
I guess I've always been a little bit more comfortable with it. Like my dad was a pastor.
Okay, fair enough.
And it was like his occupation. You know, that was how we had money.
Okay, good. You probably have a different frame than me, because like
I've always viewed it as quite vital.
Yeah, to getting food on your plate at the end of the day. Yeah, whereas like my parents always heavily involved in church, very involved. Dad's on the preaching rotation, they're on the the deacon board, and they're running kids ministry and marriage ministry, doing all sorts of stuff. Never paid a dime for any of it. It's all a labor of love. It's all just because they want to serve the kingdom. And so it's pastoral what they're doing. Neither of them has held the title of pastor, but they have certainly been pastoral in how they, relate to people.
I think the question has a bit more oomph when like it's asked abstractly and like theologically, maybe with looking at certain scriptures, or like, should this be the way that the church operates, or is this the right way to organize a church,
Yeah.
even that it would require someone that's paid. Well, let's just walk through just real quick.
Yep. Good.
How
How'd we get here?
so imagine you've decided, I don't want to do any of the churches around me. I'm not going to go with those. I'm going to start my own. I'm going to okay. That's your goal. And so what do? You go sit at coffee shops and get into conversations about theological things, or how do these things start in the first place?
Yeah.
Well, you eventually get together a cohort of people,
A few families.
more
maybe.
than you. It needs to be just more than you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you found at least one, two, a few other people.
Yeah.
And you're going to get together. And this is where I don't want to go too far afield at this junction. What you're doing is at church, but
Okay.
I don't know. You are gathering to worship God
To talk about
through different mediums. It could
Yeah.
be song, it could be conversation, it
Yep,
could
yep.
be a talk.
Yeah.
Okay. But you got together in community. In some way, you are.
aiming at the Lord.
Yes.
Yes. Gotcha.
Yeah. Now this is where we get like to the different religions. If it's something explicitly Christian and you're trying to follow Jesus, then I think part of it is invitational, in that part of the mission is to include other people with you on this. And so if everyone in the cohort is doing that, inviting a neighbor or people they run into or a coworker, now your cohort of 4 can grow to 8. Okay, well, I can still meet in I didn't have to rent any place. Like, we can still meet in our living room.
Yep.
But hey, man, just what happens with this stuff, and with a lot of different social clubs,
Communities. Yeah.
community, you will want to invite people into it to share the experience. We're communal creatures.
But inviting them changes the experience.
It absolutely does. And
Like-
so at some point, just really brass tacks, your house will probably not hold 30 people comfortably
Yeah.
to be able to do what you were doing.
Yeah.
Well, we want to continue doing what we were doing, which was this, whatever we got was worship experience.
Or even, I don't want to interrupt you too much, but even when it's 4 families getting together to talk about life and the things of God, that's one thing. It's a conversation. When it's 20, 40, 50 people, too big for your house, and that's not a conversation if everybody's trying to talk at once. So maybe you designate, hey, Joe, would you come prepared to share something you've been reading or learning about? And then maybe we'll have a discussion. But the texture of the whole experience changes as the thing grows. Yeah. So eventually you outgrow a house.
Outgrow a house, and now you're at this first roadblock of we need a common space to use to gather, and that will probably cost money.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean-
unless it's a public park or
Unless
something.
it's a public park,
probably
but
gonna-
and we don't have to spell out all to the bloody details, but I think you get the picture that if we're on the invitational, missional mindset of bringing people to participate, whatever little tack on way that you've kind of hijacked this together, you're going to outgrow it
Yeah.
to the point where like real life finances get involved.
Yeah.
Like the public park won't work, or you're breaking a permit, or
It'll
whatever it is.
happen. Yeah.
You need to probably rent out or buy a space.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, I don't know, who's making those decisions? What kind of place? Is it all purely democratic? You're just voting on everything? At some point, this community gets so big that it doesn't make sense to get everyone's 2 cents opinion on how it's going to be. You get you grant the power of decision making to somebody, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, suddenly now those decisions take a lot of time and thought into how that's being done, and you just follow me the story. Eventually, you get to the point where you keep inviting, and there's more and more decisions that need to be made based on what's going on with the community, and so everyone just kind of decides, look, Joe is really good at doing this. He's been doing it so far. He needs to, we need someone to do this full time. Like, this is starting to turn, he's been working his other job, and it takes him 30 extra hours on top of that to do all this stuff.
Yep. Yep.
So let's pay him money. I think that's how it starts.
Yeah.
So, should pastors be paid? Yes,
Because they are.
they are. And because of these different, they're providing a good and service to a community. wise decision making being one from the example we just came to. Now, I think where the question gets a little bit more sea legs is like, yeah, but what about like the ministry stuff of like preaching a sermon or leading worship or something? We get why you had to make all these phone calls and decisions and cleaning the facility or
But
something.
do you really need to get paid to do a hospital visit?
Right.
Or shouldn't you just do that? You know? And in the same way that we would encourage anybody who calls themselves a Christ follower to be doing pastoral type things, like caring for the souls of the people around you, if that's what we're saying pastoral ministry is, then it's something to some degree that we're all called to. So how do you divvy up when you need a paid position and versus, well, we've got a volunteer who's willing and able to do that.
Now, at some point, now one option is to curb the invitational model.
I was just about to ask about this.
And like, hey, man, whatever, you guys can do your thing where you keep growing and growing and growing, but this is a community of 25 people and full stop.
Now that's it's tough because you take it to the extreme. You'd hate to be the kind of church that closes its doors to somebody who's genuinely keen on coming in and learning about Jesus, right? You don't want, sorry, we're full today, max capacity, stay out. That feels bad. But I will say, at least for me, church is at its best, or I find it most life-giving and most enjoyable, most fulfilling when I know the people. Like when I am known and I know what's going on in their life and they know what's going on in mine, and we can be praying for each other, supporting each other. And at some point, when a church gets so large that you actually don't know half the people there, it just has a totally different feel to it. And maybe the answer is, and this is the answer you get, is, well, Sunday morning is not what it's all about. That's just like the on-ramp. You need to join a life group. That's where the real church happens. And maybe that's fair enough. I mean, you're pretty experienced with groups. Maybe I am unduly cynical about that. But I mean, what percentage of people would you say end up in groups versus attend on a Sunday morning in your experience?
Oh, it's way smaller.
It's really low, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably anywhere from, like, the range would be like from 30 to 50%.
Okay. Yeah.
Depending on how like big of a value that is and how much you're talking about it.
And maybe that's fine. Maybe it's fine that there's like large churches that act like an on-ramp for the gospel where people can come and it's comfortable. People are welcoming. I can have some donuts, good music, entertaining message. And I'm intrigued by this Jesus guy. I want to find out more. Maybe that's great.
So now we're tiptoeing on like models of church.
Yeah.
So in that story of maybe we solved people can be paid in ministry, and that makes sense because they provide goods and services
And dedicate.
And people have agreed.
all
They're
their
doing
time.
it voluntarily. Like, we want this to be happening.
Yeah.
So, but I did make an assumption in my story of this like explosion where maybe the leader that, like we said, we wanted to start one. Hey, we're actually, if we grow to a certain size, we are not going to get a building.
Yeah.
What we're going to do is we're not going to say no to people coming, and if it grows to like 40, 50 people, we're going to say, hey, look, just be real. We can't fit everyone here. Someone else needs to start another one of these
We're
at
gonna
their
multiply.
house. We're going to multiply.
This is what I was
That's
getting
kind
at
of the
before.
house church
which
movement.
I think is what Francis Chan is doing. So they have Francis. I might butcher this. If I do, feel free to fact check me and call me out in comments. But Francis Chan, lead pastor of a large church for quite some time, ended up somewhat recently deciding he was going to go to China and minister for a few years. Came back and now he's all about the house church. And I think the way it works is just like you're saying. There's a cohort of people. Once it gets to a certain size, it's on the pastor then to identify who's the next pastor who's going to go out and do the next one. And they kind of multiply across the city this way. Have you been part of a life group multiplication like that or something? Because there is a little sense of, but I don't want to split up the gang.
Right.
You know, like we've been together for 2 years and now half of you are going to leave and
I
start
haven't
a new
been part
thing.
of it. I've helped navigate that transition, but
Yeah.
haven't had the sting of the heartache.
Yeah. It would be tricky because you don't necessarily just want to do or is it last in first out, just order of arrival, whoever is the pioneer people, we stay
Right.
together, you guys go start something
So
new.
I think we can appreciate why how the differences in people's values have led to different church expressions. So to say like
Yeah.
how should church look or how should it be structured? Well, I don't think it's fair to say there's exactly one way.
Yeah.
Because
And it's all church. That's all church. Because that looks very different. Small little house groups clustering across the city versus a big emphasis on a Sunday morning experience at one location.
they do look different.
It's pretty different.
The attitude, I think it's the motivate, like why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And like the shorthand I used was like it's worship,
Yeah.
intentional worship, I guess.
Yep. Yep. Because one of the other challenges you can face with large church is it being built around some personality, like that the lead guy is the face of the thing or the glue that's holding it together, and people are drawn to that charisma, and if that goes, then the whole thing splits, and
So, okay,
that
Yeah.
that seems troubling to me.
can you say why? I almost want to say it's like it is the natural outcome of what's happening here. Like even in the story I was telling, that person that ends up being elected in some sense to be the paid staff person, like is spending a lot of time building connections and relationships with the people as they work in ministry, and so and they're more public facing. So
Yeah.
as the church gets bigger, they're less and less. They spend far less time with each other person than they do with the main person in terms of
Yeah.
like even seeing them. You know? So it doesn't. So it doesn't. I guess I should say it doesn't surprise me that, and I think it's cynical to call it a cult of personality or something. But
Yeah.
this is the natural outcome of the type of thing that we're doing here. And so you just need to be mindful of, are there some strategies that we can do to lessen the effect of that, or to have more personalities take center stage? What does
Yeah.
that look like? It's what will happen as the community gets bigger.
And if I can, well, going back to earlier, the story you told about Joe finding himself in this position because the community has decided ultimately that he's competent. He brings value because he's good at this. He's good at making the decisions, or he's a good public speaker, or we find it valuable when he explains the Bible to us because
Yes.
like he's digging in a way that I can't. Or
Actually, I want to amend. Maybe it's not just big churches. I mean, this happens in small ones as well. The moment the lead guy retires,
Oh, yeah,
then
yeah.
it just
You're right.
it dies.
You're right.
So it's not a big church problem.
No.
Many of the problems are not uniquely.
Yeah.
They're not size related. It's
What about, this is going back a little bit to the discussion of getting paid. What about, I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of this. As far as I know, most churches don't have their members deciding on how much staff people are getting paid. That's usually decided by deacons, servant leaders, elder board,
who are
finance team.
And the idea is that that team is a representative.
Proxy, right? That they would represent the people well.
Yeah. But they're usually told to be confidential.
Right,
So
exactly.
They're
Yeah.
not. It's a one-way street. Like
Yeah.
we elected the servant leaders, the deacons to help make those decisions, but the information
It doesn't trickle back.
flow back down.
Well, I've seen requests for that information and it gets denied. Which it's just interesting because
It is.
like if we're saying it's something.
Do you
that,
know how much the salaries of other people's goods and services that you use that aren't public servants?
Don't know.
But yeah,
Like a ballpark though.
exactly. And that's what you can do in church world. but again, I appreciate and of course know where that question. I've heard that before. There's something. It would be interesting to dive in for a moment of why that question feels like it needs to be asked in this particular area.
Is it possible to overpay a pastor? Like,
Sure.
yes. Okay.
I think so.
To the
Yeah.
point where like it's there's something unethical going on, right? Where you know what I'm saying? Where is there a cap? No pastor should make more than $1 million, $2 million a year.
I don't think so.
Really? If that's what the people find, if they get that much value out of it, then
I'm tempted to lean that way. Yeah.
even if the people don't know. This is what I'm saying. I'm just like, there are situations where you've got, I can't remember if we did a podcast on this or if we just chatted about it, but you hear stories sometimes about mega church pastor buys another mansion and he's using his private jet. And there's definitely something about it that feels like, oh man, now who knows? Maybe he invested in crypto early and he's doing just fine and good for him. He was a good steward of the salary he got given. But it does make you wonder.
Now that though, that's different. To me, that sounds different than what you were asking. That's a comment on how the money that they've earned is being used. You asked how much should they be paid.
Good. Okay, good. Fair enough.
And I think there's a nice little line we could toe there.
Mm-hmm.
You should be paid according to the value that you bring to the situation. How you choose to use that money.
That is a discipleship question.
I think what people are confusing.
Yep.
I don't mean to come across as the answer man or something.
No, this is good.
What people are confusing, the ickiness they're feeling should be directed at how the money is spent, not the amount of money made.
Because if he's a virtuous man, you'd want him to have most of the money.
I want all the virtuous people to have most of the money.
Exactly, because they will spend it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, and that's not to say that like some big ass house is like unethical.
Right.
That's a whole
separate podcast,
tough.
probably.
Tough.
Yeah.
But yeah. And it would depend a lot about like what kind of preaching you're doing. So a lot of times the ickiness will stem from, I don't believe that this is something that Jesus teaches, and therefore you're going against Jesus' teaching while claiming to be a communicator of Jesus truths.
Yeah.
But maybe it's the case that, I don't know, that's not something that their congregation talks about very often or preaches on. I don't know.
What's that? Money? You mean?
Sorry, where was I going with that? Yeah, or maybe it's not a huge value in that community of like really shrewd, frugal living. I don't know. And so to the people in the congregation, they're like, oh, okay.
Nothing's amiss. Yeah.
Or in context too, it matters a lot. Like, what if your church is in the Hamptons, like, or some rich community? Mm-hmm. You live in your community, and your house is It's $1.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
Like to be a pastor in the Hamptons, do you have to commute in 45 minutes to buy
right.
a $100,000 house?
Who's going to minister to the rich otherwise?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's worth thinking about for sure. I'm wondering as well if there is a...
But before you switch topic, just because you had brought up, but the not knowing part is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I want to turn that over more.
Like how transparent should it all be?
Yeah.
Because I've seen a lot of churches will do budget breakdowns, of here's how much we spent on facilities, here's how much we spent on missions, here's how much we spent on utilities and staff and whatever.
I felt the need now to also, probably should have said at the beginning, as many of you know, we both work at a particular church.
Oh, yeah.
And absolutely none of this is a commentary on
none
our
of this
church.
has anything to do with our church.
No, really not.
Yeah, no, not at all. Just
curious about the topic.
Thinking big picture about it all. Churches often give a general breakdown of budget, but it's not fully transparent.
An itemized
exactly.
dossier of all the
I don't know how much
expenditures
you spent on coffee. Should that be made available to maybe not church goers, but maybe members or something, or anybody who's given? Maybe I mean, I could see an argument for that, man, that if I'm giving regularly, it'd be nice to know why wouldn't you be transparent about it? What's the argument for remaining opaque?
Because the average person handling that information is not equipped to judge it well.
Because they have no idea the inner workings of
That's right.
what's involved.
You're just kind of handing a loaded gun over of how many people would walk away from that experience and think, oh, like there are no mistakes were made or something.
Yeah. You will find something to quibble with. You mean.
Right.
In the same way that I might for any charity or nonprofit that I support.
Well, I was going to ask that too. Have you ever seen anything like that?
No.
Of a full itemized breakdown?
And given how crazy some things can look given scale, like even like Compassion International or something. Okay.
We
say I
spent
give
$30,000 on the copy
on
paper.
envelopes. Oh, geez. Could we cut that down a bit? It's easy to say that until you're in the position of sending out mailers.
There just have to be so much teaching on how to even process the information.
How to interpret it.
Because it's so easy to say, let's say you give $100 a week to the church, and you've come to find out that, I don't know, they spent $400 on coffee that month. And it's easy for your brain to just say,
oh, I just bought coffee.
all my money went to the coffee.
Yeah.
And that is a completely irrational way to view the information.
Yeah.
You need to do a percentage.
Yeah.
So really, or whatever, let's just say 3 cents of your $100 went to buy the coffee.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I don't know what that amounts to in a budget, but
Yeah.
So I just don't know if I think you'd just be doing more harm than good, and that's why they don't do it. You would be, and for the goals of your organization, you'd be losing funds because people would probably back out unnecessarily, just from a lack of understanding how to intake the content. Is that thinking too ill of the average person to?
Well, I can see that argument being made for stuff like copy paper and
that's just one thing.
Behind the scenesy stuff. But when it comes to, does that still hold true of like salaries for staff persons? Because again, they must have some idea of the value they feel like the pastor is bringing to the church.
Right. So you find out that old mate makes $10,000 a year than you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're giving of your hard-earned money, but you find out that this guy makes more than you.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't like him very much, or you don't perceive him to be a hard worker. Also, you typically, at least in these bigger churches, as a congregant, aren't always fully aware or present to the behind-the-scenes work that goes into.
Oh, that's definitely true.
And like important conversations that have to be had about a number of different topics.
Yeah.
That you're just not privy to. So when you're just seeing, you're like, well, I just see him on Sunday.
He just preaches a message, and
that's if you're a forward-facing staff person.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine not having that luxury of your value being so forward.
Yeah.
I just don't see how that's a good idea.
Yeah. They still lack the context to evaluate properly.
I think that'd be it, yeah.
But ideally, the leadership team, whoever they are, deacon, servant leaders, they would have a good handle on it.
Now, I will say this, though, that in the public sector, most of the stuff is, like, not classified.
Oh, totally.
Like, you can go find out how much your superintendent makes in your school district.
Yep. Yeah.
And you are giving, kind of, to that. I mean, you're being taxed. It's not voluntary. But it has that feel in a way. If it's a for-profit, they're doing a bad job because we're trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. But
yeah,
it's basically a non-profit.
It could feel like you have something to hide by not disclosing it. I mean, I see your point that it would need to be disclosed, and then education would need to happen as well.
Or like, do you want? So what's kind of funny too? Do you feel like it's a good use of my time that you're paying me
just
for
about to go there.
explain all of this to you?
Yeah.
or to the hundreds of
Or
people.
to everybody, right? If it was everybody, it'd be a constant thing, a constant conversation you're having with people.
Yeah, part of the time you would then be paying me to do.
So part of what you're paying for is actually this explanation right now.
Funny, dude. I think that all has gone into the general norm we see
Yeah.
in nonprofits of not a full breakdown. You get an idea of where it's being allocated.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that like you can be audited. So you like some churches will voluntarily have, not just for taxes, but come audit our finances.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get a stamp of approval from this auditing organization that basically says they are doing what they say they're doing.
Well, and there's benchmarking that happens too, right? So what are other churches in the area doing, and how much do they spend on this? And
Yep.
yeah.
I haven't looked into much at all how the house church movement works.
No, me either.
With this whole like
I've only heard about them. I've never been to one.
Yeah.
I'm interested. Are there staff persons? Is anybody or any of the pastors paid at a house church?
Is it just like a service but in a house?
Here's what I imagine it to be.
Yeah.
I imagine it to be very similar to a life group. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to do dinner. Everyone bring a dish or bring a side or something, and we eat. And then maybe old mate has a guitar and we sing a few songs if we don't feel too awkward about that. And then maybe we do some prayer requests and pray for each other. And then we're reading this book together. So let's just talk about the chapter we read this week, or the Bible, or discussion. Kids are playing in the basement, and then we all go home. That's what I think house church is. Mm-hmm. If there's any house church enthusiasts out there and it's very different than that, please tell me. I'm so curious how it would be different.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And in that situation, I guess you wouldn't need to pay anyone to. It's very much volunteer capacity level.
Seems like it. I really like the sound of it. That sounds like the kind of thing I would like to go to if I'm with people I really jive with.
Great. So, as someone who works in the area of groups at a church, I would love to encounter more people like you that really want that.
Yeah. Well, now I haven't started one.
Because that's what a group. That's what that sounds like a great little group that would meet.
I could see eventually you need childcare. Maybe we can't have a discussion with all these kids running around. We need to pay a babysitter.
That happens at many.
Let's all chip in.
Yep.
That happens. But that's a pretty small budget item.
It's really that philosophy of ministry piece of like, am I going to cut off the attendance? Like I've come to the table.
Yeah.
We are not going to do this gathering in mass thing. We're going to keep it small.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need to, so that will change like how often you invite or.
Yeah.
See, what I kind of like about the classic version is that it'll take a little bit more time, I guess, perhaps, but out of my week. But I like the idea of doing both. So there's what you just described as a house church, which would be your church attendance.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone should have that. That's a great thing. In some way, like you should be experiencing what is to be had in that venue.
Yeah.
And I do like that there's this more corporate, more public space gathering where, let's say someone I encounter at Starbucks and we had a quick conversation. I don't know, is they like, hey, come to my house and I'll make you a pot roast and we'll sing songs. Whoops. Not doing that.
No way.
Here, and depending on what your church is like, if
Yep.
it's a pretty welcoming space, like it's designed for
guests and it's less threatening. Yeah.
I like that there's a space for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes at a cost. Like, and the bigger it is, like then you do need this whole childcare thing and church kids workers would not like it to be called childcare because it's all original programming.
It's kids church.
And they're trying to invest in your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so you can see how it starts to really multiply the different roles you might need.
Maybe both is the answer. Well, then I wonder, what have you found as someone who's focused a fair bit on groups? you said earlier engagement is what, 30 to 50% of people or something. Should that be higher? Is it, or is that to be expected with this kind of both end model where it's like, well, half the people who are there on Sunday, they aren't ready to dive into that yet? Or
everything should be 100%. It's kind of a funny question in the sense of, so I just said that I think it's ideal if someone were to experience what's
Yeah,
to
you
be
did.
had at a group.
yeah, you did.
I think it's ideal if you give generously of your finances,
Mm-hmm.
and probably if you attend a church, you should give to help support
Mm-hmm.
that church. I think it's ideal to be physically healthy. Oops. Well, shouldn't you be doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
I should, but I don't always.
Yeah.
So, and I think that just plays out here as well. Like, I wish everyone was in a group.
Well, then I'm curious, why, in your opinion, aren't most? What's the barrier to group attendance? Why would most people say, it's not for me? Or
Oh, there's a ton of reasons.
tell me them. Because I really haven't, I've spent no time doing what you do.
So
you
one
know?
would be temperament. There's some people that will just never go to our in-person service. They are like agoraphobic.
Sure, okay.
And so online COVID stuff has really helped them
Yep.
get connected. And we've talked about that with Metaverse.
Yep.
And how that breaks down the social anxiety. And then there's varying degrees of that, not like totally agoraphobic, but just, man, I don't know.
Social anxiety
I don't want
or-
to meet new people.
Yep.
That sounds terrifying.
Hmm.
There could be, and then they get more banal, the reasons, like, I'm a picky eater and I get embarrassed when food's offered to me at places that I don't like.
Really? You've
Yeah.
had that? That's
well, I
interesting.
think of that.
Oh, that's you? You are that man.
I think of that every time I go somewhere.
What are they going to feed me?
What are they going to try to feed me?
Better not be any tomatoes.
I know. Yeah.
How often
Probably
do
a more common one is like, I don't want to.
I was going to say, how often is it time commitment? I don't
Yeah.
want to do that midweek.
Yep.
My evenings, I just want to be on the couch and watch Netflix. I don't want to.
I think that's a huge
I do the
percentage.
church thing on Sunday morning.
That's right.
So then how do you, for folks like that, if we're saying this smaller gathering is a worthwhile experience, how do you begin to teach them that, like, that's church, really? The Sunday morning thing
I don't know if I like that.
you don't like that.
Anything.
It's all church.
Any kind of maneuver where there's this like the royal seal from the emperor, where you try to stamp something as like, this has to be this.
Yeah.
I have a red flag.
Okay.
Maybe there are some things that you need to do that, but I just don't think you have to go there
Okay.
because it's so what's the word, like coercive, or like it's not the you're trying to make me go because of a rule. Like, that sucks, dude. I don't want to follow a rule.
Well, no. What if it was like more like, this is what would be very good for you? It's like
That's different.
you're missing out. If you think it's Sunday morning is all
Sorry,
the
I
church
was
has to
missing-
offer, you are missing out on what the real meat of it is, which is community.
I was misinterpreting your should.
Oh, okay.
Like
okay.
what it should look like, or like,
Yes.
not like, this is actual church, the kind of church that Jesus wants you
This
to
is
go
the one
to.
that counts. Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't like.
Okay, got it.
I do like the invitation, like, this is your good.
Yeah.
This is for your good.
But how do you convince somebody? Because I get it. I mean, I get it. I've committed to life groups before, and like, if it's an every week rhythm, there are evenings where it's like, it's time again.
Yep.
I just want to stay home.
Well, dude, that's why it's funny to, like, let's demystify it. It's like that with literally everything else in life that's worth anything.
Yeah.
Working out, eating
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
visiting family.
There's sometimes you just don't want to.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And you cannot do it. And then you don't get that good thing. And you're an adult, so you have that
You can make
option.
that choice. Yep.
And I'm sorry that you made that choice, or
Yeah.
I understand it, though.
My question really amounts to, how do you get people to eat their vegetables? It's like,
Right, man.
this thing that's good that maybe they don't want sometimes.
So there's all sorts of it. You can just, like, talk about how good they are.
Yeah.
Like, try this. It's really not that. It doesn't really taste that
The best
bad.
way is the side door. Like, there have been times, for example, when it's not strictly a life group, but like the worship team that I led for a long time started to function like one because it was a community, a smaller community of people who are known and they know each other and they're praying for each other and taking care of each other outside of church hours, helping each other move or whatever it is. And that never had the label on it of, come join this life group. It was never that. It just sort of organically sprung up because people got a taste of community and wanted more of that. So maybe that's... do you draw a distinction these days between connect and life groups?
I don't.
No.
No, I dropped that.
Oh, we dropped it.
It's just
Okay.
groups.
Got it. Just groups. Okay. Yep. But historically, I mean, the idea has been a connect group might be like, we're going to go do some activity. We all like bowling. We all like mountain biking. We're just going to go and do that together with no strings attached of we're going to sing Kumbaya with a guitar and get awkward. We're just going to go do this fun thing and hopefully build some relationships while we do it. And then the idea is that kind of snowballs organically to start talking about the things that really matter in life. I don't know if you've seen that in your experience. Is that what happens? Are they successful when groups start out this way?
Well, see, now, I mean, to me, it is a little bit of a different thing from, like, I still hear what you're saying with, like, the life connect distinction. Just at our church, we've dropped that.
Yeah.
Just because I just kind of got tired of explaining it and that no one knew what it
Yeah,
meant.
like, fair enough.
But that to me is like a more ministry, mission focused type of thing. I want to go out somewhere and reach people that I wouldn't otherwise. The life group feels a little bit more insular, which is fine. There's a place for that. And like we're coming in rather than out.
Yep.
Sort of.
And I can see how also, and maybe this is just going back to the problem of invitation and bringing new people in. I felt this in a life group before as well, where you establish trust with everybody, and I'm willing to get this vulnerable with everybody.
Yes.
But this week we've got a new family, and I don't know them at all. And so I am not as willing to be vulnerable about what's really going on in my life because the dynamics have changed.
Yeah.
I don't really know how you avoid that. Because if it is relationship based, it's the people I have a relationship with that I trust.
Right.
So I don't know how you overcome that challenge. So the moment you invite somebody new into this space, it stops being the same space.
Which I think that's why it's good to have a number of different spaces to invite people to. So maybe the first step, like, I don't know.
Maybe it's a cookout.
You're kind of like slowly auditioning someone to join the friend group or something. It's like, well, we have this Sunday morning space and they're chill there. Cool. Am I ready to bring them to our sacred life group space where we get like super raw and real about our whole lives? No, not quite.
Yeah.
Let's see how it is at a cookout. And maybe you go through that process, you know?
Yeah.
Why can't I say it right now? I can't find it. The greater than the sum of its parts. Okay. The church is that.
You having a stroke?
Not just. I don't know, man.
There you go.
Or how about this? There are more impactful things you can do with bigger organizations. Sorry, I know that hurts, but a friend group at a house,
Economies of scale.
although it can be church,
it is a thing.
will not leave. Like, eventually, you get to the point where like there are objective sizes to footprints that are made by actual human feet and by human action in the world. You leave a footprint, you leave a mark, an impact. And what's cool about having a sizable community, I'm not saying every church should aspire to be 60,000 people. Maybe. Right. But it seems like it would be a big one, at least in like Christian
or that it's the only
theology
metric of church success or something.
The kingdom of God being made more manifest in the world. Could be extremely powerful.
Yep. A shared
So
vision
that's-
and deploying
I
of
think that's
resources.
A reason to want to
Yes, it could.
not limit yourself to when we get to 25, we're not renting any spaces and you just start your own little thing. because I almost wonder, would the church just dissipate? Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. If everything immediately became like that. Yeah.
The capital C
There's
church?
a cool book I read. His
Small
name was Hunter,
clusters.
the author, and I think it's called "To Change the World."
Mm.
And he had this interesting part in one of the chapters about
Last name?
it's important. There's so everything we said, great, and there's something to weighing what has cultural capital of it has a certain amount of currency in a culture or a climate to make impact or to influence, and frankly just architecture, place, physical place,
Mm-hmm.
carries capital. It says something. It's the reason for the most
I
part
was
that churches used to
gonna
have
ask about
steeples.
place.
There was this thought that this is the highest
Mm-hmm.
point in the town, the church. Everyone can see it. Like this, it said something about the ethos of the time, and now that's falling out of fashion or whatever.
Mm.
And is but is it
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, or is it very much tied to?
Mm-hmm.
Not saying it's the direct cause and effect or something, but the growing secularization of the culture. Fewer and fewer the nuns, NONES, have grown substantially. No religious affiliation, and is it that surprising that I don't know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The steeples, for instance, are something falling out of fashion. Just there's less desire for it to be. It's a marker for. I'm not being articulate, but
Mm-hmm.
or even just the beauty that was invested in some of these cathedrals.
Yeah, you are. It's
The
fine. I
detail
got
of
you.
the architecture spoke to like
Is it-
the institution that we're a part of here is
Sure.
extremely valuable, and we want to showcase that and how the thing's even built and what it says in the community, like that this is one of the most
Mm-hmm.
well kept buildings in town. All of that
Oh,
plays
yeah.
into like just the broader cultural. I don't know. Like we're all on this IV drip of culture, and what we see and perceive. I don't know, man. That even how the churches are built
Mm-hmm.
and the architecture and their size and the footprint in the community all plays into that of how big of a deal is God and spirituality.
Yeah. It's so interesting, man. I can totally hear both sides of that argument. Like on the one hand, I think you're right. I think things like cathedrals are designed to set your attention on the transcendent. They are designed to make you feel small when you walk in. They are designed to be beautiful, sacred spaces to point to the true good and beautiful. There's a lot of thought and care that goes into that. And I can also hear the cynic, look at how much money they spent on a building when they could be giving that to the poor, or they could be feeding hungry mouths, and that's true not just of cathedrals, but megachurch buildings. Look how many lights they have. Do they need all those lights? And I can make an argument for lights, for
You know
sure.
what? To invoke, maybe we're going a little long here. That's okay.
But it's just,
The,
I don't know what that...
Jordan Peterson's whole shtick on beauty, how it
all good.
is the most valuable thing, or at least it's very very difficult to it's difficult to overestimate how beautiful something is or how much value beauty brings. And I love his examples of the great monuments over the world and
Yes.
particularly in Europe.
Yep.
And like, well, why'd they spend all that money on the Eiffel Tower when you could have fed the hungry? Okay, look at how much money Paris gets from having the
Yep.
Eiffel Tower. I'm sure far more than it costs. The beauty of it, the grandeur is attractive
Yep.
and draws people to it. So there's something like, just
Paid
from
for
a
itself
really
at this point.
pragmatic, cold calculated, it was worth. I fed more
Mm-hmm.
mouths by spending a little bit money more here on the beautiful thing. In the long run, you know.
Yeah. Or I remember you, just if we're being pragmatic, I would rather sit in a comfortable, nice smelling church than a dank, dungeon
and catch the vision
cinder blocks
and
and
give
wet floor,
and
like,
then we fed
more people will
15
probably
times
come
the number of mouths
if we
that
make
you
this
did in
place
your cinder block house.
comfortable.
So I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to go there, but then you made me by poking fun or critiquing this strategy.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
honey, you didn't think it through. Like, yes, I laud your little group that they went
Yeah.
out and fed the mouths that you were able to. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And I wish that your thing could grow and more people could be a part of that and more mouths could feed.
That's great.
That's what we're
Yeah,
doing
good.
here. I don't know, it's been around longer and that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And people like to be part of something that's comfortable, turns out. Don't you in your house?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if the way of Jesus is I think the ascetics got it wrong. Like the self-flagellation that you have to punish yourself and strip your life of comfort. Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Vows of poverty and stuff.
Yeah, no, I have stuff to say.
Maybe
about
that again is a whole other episode.
Yeah. Well,
I'd
I
just
went
be
to school
curious.
with a lot of the Jesuits in training. That by the time, they had just
How
taken
should we think
their
about
vows
money?
of
I know you got stuff
celibacy.
to say about it.
These, yeah, as well as poverty.
Oh,
Yeah. And it was just fascinating to get to rub shoulders with them and just
Celibacy.
the strapping
Oh,
young
okay.
guys.
As well as poverty. Okay.
Maybe I don't have more thoughts other than that, but just
Yeah.
can't believe it. Cool, man. Well, I think
Other
that
than,
gets
oh
to
my
what.
gosh. Yeah. Man.
Sweet.
It was helpful for you guys too.
Yeah.
This is just how it goes.
That was helpful. I mean, that's a
What's
helpful
a big
conversation for me,
takeaway?
so
Like, mine would be.
hopefully it was helpful for you
mine
guys
would
too.
Be
This is
careful.
just
it's
how it
tempting
goes. We're
and
two guys
it's
trying to figure
you
stuff
wanna
out.
give a general principle and a rule, and this is how it ought to be. But maybe there's just a lot of different. There's a lot of room for different expressions for church, and. Maybe there's just a lot of different.
My takeaway
There's a lot of room for different expressions for
when you
church.
find yourself cynical about
I guess my takeaway would be when you find yourself cynical about, say, what churches are doing or how it's being spent, understand that it is complex, and I think part of what we're getting at is part of the responsibility of church leaders is to make those tricky decisions at times of how much money do we spend on a new light versus local ministry, and those are ongoing challenges that churches have to figure out.
good or bad. Write it.
Yeah.
I want to hear about it. Or leave a comment.
I am very intrigued by house church stuff. If any of you are part of a house church or you've got experience with a house church, good or bad, write in. I want to hear about it. Or leave a comment on this video if you're watching on YouTube. I'd be very curious to hear about the good and the bad and the ugly. What works? What was the challenge? Because it really intrigues me. Yeah. Well, thanks for listening. Like I said, you can reach out to us, either leave a comment on YouTube or if you want to email, mailbag@openatruth.com. And join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks and stay curious.